just give us a shout and that. Yeah, we're live. We're live on YouTube now.
There you go.
So Andy and Mark and myself talked about the kind of amount of information that we were gathering up, particularly up after those digital manufacturing webinars, that ITATs that we done in the last few weeks. And Andy set up a forum which covers everything to do with ITAT. It's got links to all of the old ITATs that were recorded on YouTube. I think there's only one really significant one that was missing, which is where I mucked up with Dave Wilshire, but that's a good excuse to get Dave back for next year. But on there, you can put up files, STL files, CAD files. Andy's tweaked it so that you can load up, CAD files, DXF files, STL files, Lightburn files, all of that kind of thing. Yep, there we go. Andy will probably put the link in as well.
Yeah, I'll put the link in the chat.
Yeah, he'll get that in the chat. So yeah, head on over there afterwards and join up and take part. You can see there's already quite a bit of info there. So tonight we've got achievement scheme. We've got all the big hitters in the achievement scheme sat in with us. They're going to talk about latest developments in achievement scheme and also latest regulations, etc. Keep us right up to date for 2023. We've got getting on for 160 participants, which is good. So I don't think any more ado, we'll hand over to the achievement scheme team. Away you go, chaps.
Thank you very much, Barry. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, it's probably worth for you three chaps that might not be quite so, but the viewers might not be quite so familiar with, to do a quick intro.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank everybody for attending tonight. It's been a while since we've done a in the air tonight, but it's good to be back. I'm Duncan McClure. I'm the Achievement Scheme Controller for Power and Silent Flight. And joining me tonight, we have Achievement Scheme Review Committee members Chris Bradbury, who's our current chairman. There's Chris. Thank you very much, Chris. And also Charlie Cox, who's our current secretary. And of course, Andy Simmons, who has as club support officer, has a seat on the Achievement Scheme Review Committee. And I also know that some of our other committee members are in the audience tonight, but not necessarily here as panelists. But thanks everybody for coming along. And as Barry said, we're going to have just a little bit of the basics of what the scheme's about, and then a little bit of a look at what's changed and the reasons why we've made a few tweaks and modifications for 2023. But the idea is that the presentation is only about 15-20 minutes to leave plenty of time for a sort of Q&A session. So Andy, if you wouldn't mind sharing your screen so that we can start the brief PowerPoint presentation, that'd be good.
There we go. Can you all see that?
Yep.
Got it now. Fantastic. Cool. Okay. So it's really an introduction to the scheme and what's new for 2023. Okay, Andy, next slide, please. I sound like Chris Whitty now. If only I was as good as Chris Whitty, I admire that man. Okay, so what are we going to look at tonight? First of all, what are the benefits of engaging with the scheme? Talk a little bit about examiners and their requirement now to hold a current registration competency certificate. Going to mention a little bit about suites, also a little bit about the camera drone test. Then going to talk about training and testing days, which I hope attendees are familiar with now. It's a sort of initiative we've been running for the last couple of years or so that's proving to be really popular. And then, as I said, if we can keep this reasonably short, we'll then have plenty of time for a Q&A session where people can ask us questions about things that are important to them. Okay, so what are the benefits of taking part in the achievement scheme? Most important thing, as I hope you're all aware, it's an entirely voluntary scheme. It's not compulsory, although I'm sure many people feel that their clubs might push them down that route. But the important thing to remember is that it's there to encourage our members to improve both their flying skills, their competence, and their safety. And we now have something like there are actually 30 tests across all the various disciplines that are contained within the achievement scheme. And that doesn't include examiner and instructor ratings, and also all the additional silent flight achievements that are run by BARC. So there are just 30 basic tests, or 30 tests within the achievement scheme itself. Important thing is it's recognized as a valuable asset to the BMFA by the CAA. And the outcome, the important thing to remember is that because it improves safety, it's a real positive contribution to keeping our insurance costs and our insurance premiums that are a significant proportion of our membership to the sort of levels that they are now. So we're actually a relatively safe pastime. Okay, so that's the advert. So next slide, please, Andy. So one of the recent things that I hope you're all aware of is that we've required examiners for the last year or so to hold a registration competency certificate. As I hope members are aware, the registration competency certificate is a simple 40-question multiple choice online quiz that you can take to gain the certificate. It doesn't matter. You can have multiple goes at taking it. The software tells you which questions you got wrong. So it's a relatively easy thing to follow. It's if you go through logically, you shouldn't really have, and you're more than reasonably familiar with our Article 16 authorization, then you shouldn't have any difficulty passing the test. And it's the most relevant test for our members to take because all the questions are based on our Article 16 authorization. The important thing about the authorization itself is that it's issued annually. And so every year there is the potential for it to change. And certainly in the first few years, there were substantial and significant changes in the authorization, which meant that the questions in the RCC changed. So that's why we originally asked examiners to take an RCC that they'd taken within the last 2 years. Okay, Andy, I think that's probably the first line of the next slide, please. But of course, because the CAA recognised achievements within the achievement scheme, many examiners and indeed members could claim grandfather rights, which exempted them from taking the RCC, provided they ticked a box to say that they were familiar with the Article 16 authorization. Unfortunately, it was rather bluntly brought to the attention of the Achievement Scheme Review Committee that there were examiners out there that clearly weren't current or familiar with the Article 16 authorization and not familiar with the registration competency certificate. There were examiners that obviously weren't aware that CAP 658 had been withdrawn. We were in the embarrassing situation where we had people that were presenting for tests, candidates who were presenting for tests that were better informed than the examiners. So that was why the ASRC instigated the requirement for examiners to hold an RCC rather than claiming grandfather rights. Okay, next slide, please, Andy. And what we required, what the initial requirement was that an examiner had taken the RCC within the last 2 years. So they could be 1 year out of sequence. And that was done for practical purposes in terms of when people might take the RCC during the year, et cetera, et cetera. It was the only way to practically implement it. However, so that was the initial requirement, but things have changed, and for a number of reasons. First of all, the CAA allowed a validity period for a registration competency certificate of 5 years. So although we, ASRC, were saying that an examiner had to have taken the test within the last 2 years, the CAA was saying, well, actually, it's fine if you take one within the last 5. So there was a little bit of an inconsistency there. And also, as time progressed, the Article 16 authorization became a fairly developed document. In other words, it wasn't changing on a regular basis. And also, it's less likely to change significantly. The Achievement Scheme Review Committee reviewed the time period for which examiners had to retake the test. Okay, next slide, please, Andy. And now the requirement is only for examiners to pass to hold a valid RCC. In other words, they have an RCC that they've taken within the last 5 years. So now we have a situation where our requirement matches the CAA's, which is a relatively sensible and practical thing to do. And it also recognizes the fact that our Article 16 authorization is now a developed document. And what that means is that when the latest version of the authorization comes out, we haven't had to change the questions in the RCC. So there's no real requirement for examiners to go back and have to retake the test. There is a caveat built in with this, that should there ever be a significant change in the Article 16 authorization going forward, and hence the questions in the RCC may change, then we need to keep the requirement that examiners should go back and retake the tests. But that's an unlikely circumstances, we think. And the reason I've got misconception at the bottom of the screen is when we introduced all of this, there was a lot of posts on social media that suggested that we'd lost an awful lot of examiners because of this. And actually, that's just simply not true. The numbers don't bear that common misconception out. In fact, for some strange reason, we lost rather a large number of examiners in 2019 than we did when we introduced the RCC. But you have to remember that we lose examiners every year through natural wastage anyway. And also, the other side of the coin is that it's very important for examiners to remain current. And if by introducing this that there was some pruning of dead wood, well, that was just a natural thing anyway. So this is the important thing now is for examiners going forward, all they have to do is hold a valid RCC. And how do you find out if your RCC is valid? It's valid for 5 years, and the date you took the test is actually on the printed certificate or the electronic copy, if that's the way you keep it. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. So suites. So suites has changed for 2023, and I really need to explain it's changed in 2 ways. First of all, we've actually changed. We've made it a requirement that it's now a pre-flight element of every test. So we're expecting every candidate as part of their test to run through a suites sort of risk assessment. And this has come about directly as a result in a response to the variety of incident reports that have been reported over the last 18 months, 2 years, where it's fairly obvious that pilots have been committing to flight without proper consideration of things that might affect them or their aircraft during the flight. And the classic ones, or the ones that appear so often on the incident reports, are listed here at the bottom of the screen. So people flying through the sun and losing sight of their models, struggling by taking off when the wind conditions are too strong or too turbulent for either the pilot's ability or the model's capability, flying in conditions that are poor or failing light with mist and fog. And all of these things tend to end up with the pilots losing visual line of sight of the model, which of course then is a requirement triggers a requirement for reporting. Okay, next slide, please, Andy.
So with suites as well, it's probably worth mentioning that with Article 16, when you're going out to fly, you need to be able to do a risk assessment if you're going to fly in recreational areas. And suites is a major part of that risk assessment process as well.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chris. And the other thing that we've done is I said the Achievement Scheme Review Committee have suggested to the CEO, because Dave Phipps, as CEO, is now in charge of the Members' Handbook, that what the letters mean, or the explanation for each of the letters in suites should be amended, but I'm not sure that that's yet to have appeared in the Members' Handbook. And I think the important point is the second bullet here is we will always seek to adapt scheme materials to mitigate any obvious trends in the incident and accident reports that are submitted. And a good example a year or two ago was when we made the fail-safe check a mandatory part of all scheme tests. And as it says in the bottom 2 bullet points here, we're just doing our best to demonstrate back to the Air Accident Investigation Board and the Civil Aviation Authority that we're taking positive steps as a result of what we see in those incident reports. And of course, it's very much this is not to encourage people to engage in the reporting process. It's very much a no blame process, or no blame approach, and it's just so that others can learn from the experience of others. Okay, Andy, I think next slide, please. So just wanted to pick up, we did mention this in one of our previous In the Air Tonights, but I just want to pick up again because it's actually the most recent test that we've added to the Achievement Scheme portfolio. And the reason we adapted or modified the camera drone test was because there had actually been very little uptake in the original A test, primarily because there's a significant number of the machines that people were buying didn't have the capability to deactivate GPS, which was essential to take the old A test. And we wanted to encourage uptake, and we wanted the test to be appropriate for the types of machine that people are flying. So it's actually the same test as we had previously, but basically now GPS is permitted, or the use of GPS is permitted. Andy, if you could have the next slide, please, which I think the next slide just summarizes so it's now called the Camera Drone Certificate of Competence. It replaces the old Camera Drone A test and BPC. And as I just mentioned at the end of the previous slide, it's the same test as previously, but now the use of GPS is permitted. And I just mentioned that because it is our most recent test, and also because of the importance that we hope drone membership will have going forward. So the last topic I wanted to talk about tonight with the training and testing days, these are some pictures of one of our previous events at Buckminster. Chris and I and Brian Cooper, the chap on the extreme left-hand side of the picture there, is another member of the Achievement Scheme Review Committee with some of the successful test candidates on the day. Okay, if we have the next slide, please.
We've also got Simon Wood next to me there. He's one of the newest members of the Achievement Scheme.
Oh, he is. Good spot, Andy. Yes, I should have spotted that. Thanks for that. Okay, next slide, Andy, please.
There you go.
So training and test days, what are they all about? Well, it's a concept that has been developed by the ASRC over the last few years. I think it was pioneered by the Northwest area. Kevin Watson took the lead, again, another ASRC member. But we've run a series of what we think are very successful events. The people who attended them have enjoyed them. We've certainly enjoyed presenting them. We've got quite a few scheduled over the coming year at Buckminster, which you can find all the details on either the Buckminster calendar or the Achievement Scheme website if you fancy coming along. They're sort of spread out throughout the year. And it's not just the Achievement Scheme Review Committee running these events, but just to show you how useful they are, some of you may be aware that the BMFA Southwest area for many years had been split into Devon and Cornwall for a variety of reasons that we won't go into here. But they were re-amalgamated last year, and we used a training and testing day to really good effect to sort of reinvigorate the scheme in the Southwest area. Some of us went down there and spent a weekend with the guys talking through all the ins and outs of the scheme. They still had a handful of club examiners and area chief examiners, but it was a really good opportunity via training and testing days to reinvigorate the scheme and reinvigorate interest in the scheme. So if we go on to the next slide, please, because it's not just things for the ASRC to organise. We've encouraged all of the BMFA areas to adopt the concept. And indeed, many areas have already run very successful training and testing days. There's been quite a number of events at local clubs, and they're more appropriate. Training and testing days more appropriate, more focused on people who are perhaps preparing to take a test or have been preparing to take a test and are ready. Than the old examiner workshops, which are a little bit more just focused on examiners and consistency, which is important. And there is still a place for workshops, but training and testing days probably have a wider appeal. And hence it helps with the two latter bullet points I've got on the screen here: better engagement with members and the opportunity to emphasize that we actually do all this for fun, and what we're just trying to do is help everybody improve and enjoy their flying more. Okay, next slide, please. Oh, Andy, do you want to say a few words here about this?
Yes. If you're your club, or if you're an area out there listening and you're organising events locally that are achievement scheme related, can you make sure you put them on the events calendar at events.bmfa.uk? You don't need to add them to the achievement scheme website any longer, because as long as you put them on events.bmfa.uk and select that it's an achievement scheme event from the event type drop down, it will automatically come through. So you've got it there. So that's all you need to do to ensure it's listed. And that's a bit of a screenshot of where you're listing the event, and you can see there's where it says event type, there's a drop down and it's the top item in it. Select that and then it will appear on the calendar for you. So you've only got to put it in one place now. It's something we've been working on for a while. So yeah, that just goes on the main BMFA events calendar. It'll go in the back of the BMFA news then. And it'll be on the achievement scheme website as well, all putting it in the one place. Okay.
I think that's really handy, because it just makes it easy. And the other great thing is it does, like you say, it does appear in the back of BMFA news. So yeah,
that's it. Okay,
fantastic. Okay, I think then I'm sorry it's been so this is the web link to the achievement scheme website. If you didn't know, we have a dedicated website for the achievement scheme. There is a link from the main BMFA website should you go that route, but that's your if you have any questions about anything to do with the achievement scheme, I'm sure you'll find it in any of the documents or all of the documents that are there on the website. But if not, you can always drop a line to either myself or the committee, and we're only too pleased to help. Okay, I think that's about it, Andy.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's been a bit of if I've rushed through all of that, but the idea is to give you guys more time to ask questions, and hopefully we can answer. So over to you guys.
I think before we go into Q&A, just something I'd like to say is that the most common myth that we come across is people assume that these are licenses or something you have to do. And I think that's the thing we need to stress, is the achievement scheme is voluntary. It's not a requirement of Article 16 to have the certificates. It's not a requirement of the member's insurance to have a certificate. It's purely personal achievement for personal merit, basically to get the bragging rights when you go down your club and say, I've passed my test, I've done that. It's that whole sense of personal assessment and personal goals and striving to be a better pilot and safer pilot.
No, it's good, Chris. And just as a matter of interest, we've got something like over 20,000 BMFA members hold one certificate or another.
That is one of the questions that John Lawton's asked. What percentage of the current BMFA membership have passed an achievement scheme test?
Yeah, so it's
how has that changed? Is it changing over time?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't got the historical data. I've only got the most recent data, but
I think it is increasing bit by bit. I think more and more clubs are realising it's actually quite a good thing to be doing. It does drive better standards of safety and flying. It's simple as that for me.
And also, it's all the hard work's been done for them. It's all the documents, all the tests are highly developed. Most have been in existence for quite some time. They've been adjusted and adapted accordingly. So it's like a turnkey system you can just buy into. So.
Yeah. Right,
and
then.
you can fire away with the questions.
Yeah, we've half a dozen questions there in the question and answer. If anybody else has got any, get them typed in, and we'll start working our way through them. So, a question from Tony Smith. This is probably for Chris, I suspect. Are there any plans to update the fixed wing A and B cert YouTube videos that we've got?
Yes.
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 Yes. Would you like to expand on that?
Yes. We've done the fixed wing one first, which was pretty much a learning curve. Hopefully people realise the helicopter one got slightly better. The next one is possibly some multi-rotor ones, and then the plan is to go straight back to the fixed wing if we don't do it at the same time as the multi-rotor one. But yes, the fixed wing video does need to be updated and just changed around a little bit.
I think it's fair to say that we're very conscious that we, especially in this day and age, that we need to have all of the guidance in a variety of different formats, and video, of course, is very popular. But and we're kind of spoiled with having Chris on board now. But he's a bit like Andy. He's a seriously stretched resource. So we can. So, but there is the plan to redo some of the original videos to bring them up to the standard of the helicopter A and B, which I'm sure you'll all agree, if you've seen them. If you haven't, go and watch them. Are absolutely superb. A really good way of picking up all the information. Because the other thing
a load of other little videos that have popped out as well on the British drone flyers, like things like about the flying sub 250 grams in the A1 open category, and some of these kind of myths and bits and pieces. So there's a lot of bits and pieces feeding out all the time.
Yeah. And the other thing I think it's fair to say is that we're very aware that the existing guidance documents are fairly lengthy and wordy. So it's on the radar for the committee for this year to try and bring those into a more funky, a more simple, more easily accessible format.
User-friendly and digestible.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We've got to make it easy. So, sorry, Andy, I interrupted. Carry on.
No, that's all right. Right, long question here, so you might have to bear with me. This is from Russ Bowie. He says he totally understands the use of a full power check, especially for IC engines, but what is the point of a full and free movement check at the same time? Most models are shaking and straining massively under the load, so trying to check something like a servo movement is nigh on impossible. At best, this is simply rushed to be completed. Also, doing this check puts a massive strain on both the airframe and undercarriage, as the aircraft cannot move as a result of the inputs as it would do in flight. Is the check really beneficial? So, over to you guys on that one.
There's a couple of aspects there. One, depends on your model. If you think of some of the larger, I fly 1/3 scale electric models with 24 kilo torque servos, it's more than plausible under full load that you could actually lose power to one or more of the servos if the receiver's not getting its power through. So that's one aspect of doing a full power test, is to make sure that all components of your system are functional. You've then got the risk of blowback, haven't you, on various different servos. You're looking for any flutter on the control surfaces. There's various different things that you're looking for by doing a full power test.
Yeah, you're just checking the radio system and the servos under the worst conditions.
Yeah,
under the most load, most vibration, especially if it's IC, and it's, let's say, it's full size practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good answers. John Lawton again. How does the BMFA achievement scheme compare to any equivalents elsewhere, i.e. USA, European countries, etc.? What can we learn from that?
Oh, it's infinitely better.
There's quite a few countries don't actually have anything, so
this is true.
They've got nothing, and we're better.
No. Well, what's interesting, the one that's worth picking up probably is the SAA, because they have a scheme. It's administered slightly different to ours, and the tests don't exactly mirror all of the maneuvers and checks that we have in ours. But there is mutual recognition between some of the tests in the SAA scheme and our scheme. So, but beyond that, I don't think we've looked or compared internationally, have we? Not that I'm aware of, anyway.
I think as Chris has said, some countries don't have anything at all. The others have something very similar. I would like to think we're up near the better quality end of them across the world. And indeed, our scheme has been copied by various countries. We fairly regularly asked by associations in other countries for the handbook, and can they borrow the handbook and borrow the achievement scheme documents to, so they can start working on their own. So
we've even had a couple of the commercial recognised assessment entities that do drone training asked to use some of our documentation to create their own flight tests. They're companies that are approved by the CAA to do testing on behalf of the CAA. So, if we're good enough, then that shows where we're at.
Yeah. So, a question from Stuart Willis, who's got a question from one of his area examiners by the look of it. Fail-safe for electric helicopters. The guidance is to test fail-safe each flying session. It's fairly easy for fixed wing, but to remove any blades, etc., for a helicopter can be problematic. Any thoughts to review the guidance for helicopters?
Shall I take that one as the heli flyer here?
Yeah.
It's the type of machine. You can't skip a safety check just because it's slightly inconvenient. Is the answer to that. I fly helicopters, I fly drones, I fly fixed wing, I fly all of them. And I test them all as they need to be tested. So with the helicopter, that does mean taking the blades off. I would argue for most helicopters, it is only one single bolt per blade. So with two blades, it's only 2 bolts. It's not the most complicated of things to do. Yes, it's a little bit time consuming, but safety is safety at the end of the day.
Yep.
Colin Upshur, are there any BMFA Southern area, it says A test scheduled this year? I'm assuming it means testing and training days. And the answer being, we don't know yet. It's a question that you need to ask of the Southern area. They have the websites, check on their website and get in touch with them. Hopefully there will be. And if you're specifically needing somebody to do some tests, contact your area achievement scheme coordinator and badger them, or perhaps offer your club to, if your club's happy to host an event, that's your best option. You want to far to travel then either.
And also if they have any problems, just contact us. I'm right on the border of the southern area, so I'm quite happy to go and help out if needs be. So I'm actually in a rather strange position. My official area is South Midland, but I could be in the Midwest, the western or the southern area from where I live quite easily. So anyway, but yes, if you have any problems, try locally first, but ultimately you can contact the ASRC or myself, and we'll do our best to help.
There's a couple of other things they could do. If they are in a club, they could ask their club to host, to ask the committee if they're interested in hosting an event, and we'll help them organise that. If they've got a few people that are struggling to get tests organised, because we can sometimes hear that, I can't get an examiner down to the field on a day, do contact your local area through the Achievement Scheme website, and they can organise for one of the ACEs to come out and do some tests.
Yeah, we've just had something coming in the chat. Yeah, there's 2 comments. Chesil Club, they're planning training and testing by the look of it, and that's from Wayne Broom. Somebody calling himself Throt is saying that the Wimborne Club as well. They're having training and testing day as well. So I would hope they'd end up on the Southern Area website and the Achievement Scheme website as well, and the main events calendar. So it looks like you will have a few down that neck of the woods. And Felix has also put that the southwest area are having a repeat of last year's very successful event as well.
Good to hear.
That's good. Right, back to the questions. Right, Martin Harris. A common criticism of the scheme is lack of consistency between examiners. Would it be too much of an imposition to impose a requirement for examiners to attend a levelling event, even if just online, every 3 years or so? Areas could facilitate this by running examiners' days at different locations within their areas.
This is actually something we've discussed quite a bit as a committee, and things like the RCC that we implemented and saying the examiners had to stay current. That's us doing exactly that, basically, isn't it? Trying to stay on top of them and make sure everyone's up to date and current.
Yes, and we also have the exam, as I say, I mentioned during the presentation the examiner workshops that we used to run. There is a guidance document on running examiner workshops for areas to run, and although they don't have the wide appeal of a training and testing day, they're still a very useful element, and they're designed specifically to help improve consistency in examiners. I think it's important to remember the system will never be perfect. It's the same with taking a driving test. The one examiner is bound to be, a little bit slightly different to another. So we can only do our best to encourage consistency. And if your area wants to run an examiner workshop, then there's a guidance document on the Achievement Scheme website to help them do that. So.
And I think it's also worth pointing out, while it might be a common criticism, I'm not entirely sure it is that valid myself. There's no massive amount of evidence to say that there are wildly varying levels between examiners. There will be some, there's always going to be some outliers. But certainly my experience in all the workshops and training and testing days I've attended over the years, and that's quite a lot. The standard is fairly, I would say it was a fairly narrow band that fits probably 95% of the examiners. So, and we've also got to remember that they're all volunteers. So we've got to be a little bit careful how much we impose. There's got to be good justification for it. But, if the things are there for examiners to attend, we're doing what's required. But I think much beyond that is probably pushing it a little bit too much, in my view.
Yeah, I think the important thing to remember is we rely. The scheme is actually run. It's not run by myself. My job is really just to make sure everybody follows the rules, and it's not run by myself and the Achievement Scheme Review Committee. It's really run by areas and clubs. Areas appoint area chief examiners, and clubs, and they appoint club examiners after clubs have nominated the individual. And examiner positions are only for 1 year at a time. So they have to be, every single examiner has to be re-ratified every year, whether it's an area chief or a club examiner. And but that process is there to enable either the club committee or the area committee to maintain the standards for us, to say, actually, Fred Bloggs, he's club examiner, he's been club examiner for the last 5 years. He's doing a great job helping out within the club, encouraging people to take tests, to fly safer, etc., etc. He's fantastic. We'll re-ratify him for the following year. Or alternatively, Fred Bloggs, he's a little bit wayward. He does this, he does that we're not quite happy with. He doesn't always follow club rules. So that's how examiners are controlled and monitored on a regular basis. And if you think about it, neither myself nor the Achievement Scheme Review Committee can actually do that. We rely totally on local knowledge, information on the ground, to guide the way the examiners behave within the scheme. Okay, there's all the written guidance documents, which you hope that they all read, but I hope you can see from a practical point of view, that's the only way that it can effectively be administered in terms of consistency and all those sort of good things. So, anyway, sorry, I'm rambling again. Sorry, Andy.
A quick question from Stephen Kirby, which I can probably answer, actually, because it'll be me that'll be doing it. When are the 2023 documents planned to be uploaded on the website? Imminently. There's been a few last-minute tweaks, sweets, and a few other bits and pieces, but this should be up and on there in the next few days, hopefully. So that's an easy one. And question from Peter Becker across in America, where they don't fly balloons anymore. In scouting, we used to have merit badges. Does this program attract youth?
It can do, I think. Yeah. There's no age limit on the tests. The only requirement is that they fly the manoeuvres, same as anyone else.
I think the younger end tend to be more keyed into doing things like the achievement scheme as well. It tends to, I think, for some of them, it means that a little bit more.
And we've got lots of. I don't think there's been an article over the last few years that hasn't featured, some junior members have very successfully taking tests. So yeah.
I think you did actually cover this earlier on during the slides. Yeah. Ian Mackenzie asking, do we recognise the SAA achievement scheme?
Yep. I mean, you need to look at the achievement scheme handbook to see exactly what equivalences are recognised, but it's in
there isn't. I don't think there's an equivalency across every test. Certainly there isn't. The fixed wing tests and the helicopters, they're broadly the same. One thing on there. Essentially, how it works is if we have a member join who's got an SAA fixed wing power bronze, for example, if they send us proof of that, we will add the fixed wing power A to their record, but only if they've done the RCC. There is a requirement to have done that, because we've had the mandatory questions since back in 2016. I think they came in. So yes, we do recognise some of them, shall we say?
Yeah, I think you raised the important point there is that the SAA scheme, they don't have mandatory questions or the RCC. So that's why, in order to recognise an SAA certificate or to convert it into a BMFA one, we'd need them to take the RCC, because there's no SAA equivalent, basically. Sorry, Andy.
That's okay. Question from Keith Sedgwick. Have we any plans to have training days for new instructors?
All the achievement scheme events at Buckminster, we'd welcome people to come up and do some instructor training. We quite often get people that come up to the achievement scheme days that have been nominated for club examiner, for example, through their club, and they come up to learn how to do it before actually having their exam. They'll come and shadow us doing some tests and things like that. So any of the ASRC events at Buckminster, and I should imagine any of the ASRC events that we host anywhere, would welcome people to come along as in learn to be instructors.
Certainly since we moved the sort of focus to the training and testing, where it tends to be a more informal event, where we effectively do what the people that turn up want us to do. So, if somebody turns up and wants a bit of guidance on instructing, that's what we'll do. And that seems to have worked well, doesn't it, over the past couple of years?
Yeah. It's certainly popular.
Best advice to any new instructor is keep it on the blue bit, not the green bit.
Yeah, stay away from the edges of the air and you're fine. Right, question from John Collister. While many clubs require an A cert to fly solo, once the A is passed, in many cases training then comes to a halt. In one of my clubs and in another I know of, a number of after the A sessions are being run, not just for those who want to get their B, but also those who don't want to go as far as the B but want to improve. Is this something the AS should encourage?
We certainly could do.
Definitely.
The club I'm in, I quite often get people asking me to show them how to do double rolls and stuff that's way beyond the A level, as it were. It's probably just down to the individuals in a club as much as anything, I would have said, isn't it? In terms of
very much.
What enthusiasm people have and what they want to achieve.
Yep.
And now I think, the clubs have got the ambassadors of the scheme in there in the examiners and instructors. So, if there is a demand for it in the club, hopefully the club has got the means to meet the demand with your instructors and examiners. But yeah, sounds great for me. But we do need to remember that, if somebody's passed his A test and he's happy pottering around the sky, as long as he's happy and he's enjoying it and he's doing it safely and he's having fun, that's what it's all about at the end of the day, isn't it? So fair play to him, I say.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Charlie?
Well, I was just going to add to that the clubs that I'm involved with, most examiners, instructors, and some of the more experienced flyers are happy to take on newly qualified A certificate people anyway and show them the way forward. It's just a natural progress as far as I can see.
It's learning by peer, isn't it? Learning by peer, essentially.
As long as people are willing to teach, people will be taught.
Yep.
Quite often I find, just as an expansion on that point, and this goes before the ACET as well sometimes, people have to ask if they want help. You know, we're all guilty of this. We can all turn up to a field, watch people flying and think, well, maybe he should be doing that a bit better. But how often do we actually go and offer that advice or information? You know, and how often do we wait for them to come and ask us? You know, so it's a two-way street there, I think.
Right, question from Ian Thompson. You say the examiner workshops are not as valuable as training days, or it's more of a statement. I'm not entirely sure that's what was said, but any comments on that?
I think
No, it's just
we've changed the structure, isn't it? Really, we've just changed the way we give out the information. The examiner workshops are still there, but it's done in a different.
Yeah, they're for a different audience. I think that was the message I was trying to get across. Wasn't saying one was more important than another. They're just different audiences, really.
Yep. Right, this one probably for Chris or Miss Chris and me. This one. Do the BMFA recognise the CAA Remote Pilot Certificate of Competence for the A2 Open category, otherwise known as the A2 CFC?
We've got no reason not to. So,
yeah, it's not ours to not recognise, is it? It exists. Yeah,
I was just going to say, the thing with the A2 is it's a different category of flying. So when you look at how most of us fly, we're probably flying at Model Flying Club in the A3 Open category, 150 metres away from anything that's considered built up, farmers' fields. The A2 CFC just doesn't, it's not going to give you any benefit.
Everybody's flying under Article 16, Chris.
But you know what I mean? They're under A3 or Article 16. Yeah. If you're someone like me that maybe has a small camera drone and takes it off to take pictures somewhere, like, I don't know, you want to go and take your Mavic Mini into Liverpool and take pictures of the roof of the Liver building and that kind of thing. The Article 16 doesn't cover you for that, but the A1 does. The A2 covers you for different things. So if you were trying to do something with a 900-gram drone and making it commercial, then the A2 means you can do that in that category, whereas Article 16 doesn't allow commercial activity. So, yeah, I mean, the A2 CFC fully recognised by the BMFA, but for the most of us, it's not relevant or not necessary. But if you need the A2 CFC, that's when it's probably more relevant than what we have.
Yeah. As I say, it's probably not a case of it. It's not something we either recognise or don't recognise, because it's just something that exists for people operating who want to operate in the A2 Open category, isn't it? Yeah. But you can actually add it. We did put it onto the membership system. So if you've got one and you want to upload proof to the membership system, you can. There is facilities there to do it.
It's also worth mentioning that BMFA members can get it for £49 from the UAV Academy. If you go to the BritishDroneFlyers.org website, there is an A2 link on the tabs. You just fill out details, BMFA number, and it comes through to me, and I'll email you the discount code.
Yeah,
it's that simple.
Yeah. Right, Matthew Dawson, not necessarily specific to the achievement scheme, but we've had a few of our club trainees ask, what is the flyer ID and why did it come into existence?
One for you, Andy.
Well, what I would say is get them to read the BMFA news, the last issue. Turn to Club Corner at the back, because I hadn't had any club profiles submitted, so I had to write something. So it was I know it's shocking. It was demystifying the sort of registration and competency requirements. But essentially, the flyer ID is proof that you've passed the CAA's version of the RCC. Effectively, that's effectively all it is. Means that the CAA consider you competent.
It's a
And
basic way of demonstrating that you understand that there are laws that you have to abide by, and
Exactly.
that you understand what some of those laws are.
yeah,
You know.
that's it. So
I think the problem has come is that the police who have to enforce these things don't understand that there are other methods of demonstrating competence. Like you could claim grandfather rights from an achievement scheme test taken a few years ago, or you could have done the RCC. So the problem now isn't that we're all being issued automatically by the BMFA, so members don't have to do anything, and with flyer IDs, really just so that the police can effectively administer the law.
That will happen in the next couple of months, I suspect. They're still working on the system to do it. But if you've passed the BMFA RCC, or you've passed you've got your A certificate from before the date, you will be assuming you've ticked the tick box, because obviously in these days of GDPR, we have to get consent to do everything with data. As long as you've read the email that was sent out and tick the box on the membership portal, when the system goes live, it will just happen automatically and you don't have to worry about it.
I think one thing just to add as well, that in terms of why did it come into existence, is get rid of this myth that it's because of drones. So a lot of people assume that because of incidents like Gatwick and the drone fiasco at Gatwick, that's why we have all these new rules and regulations. These rules and regulations were massively under development years before anything like that ever happened. So, this didn't happen because of that. It was already on its way. The airspace has changed. The requirements of the use of the airspace has changed. And we've got future developments still coming. I mean, flying taxis and deliveries by drone, yes, still a bit of a pipe dream at the moment, but they will eventually, I'm sure, turn up at some level. So
to be fair, drone deliveries are happening already, aren't they?
I
see it for
stuff
things
going
like
out to the Isle of Wight, and there's stuff going out to islands in Scotland.
things like organ delivery to hospitals and stuff like that. And I would see it site-to-site deliveries for industry. I very much doubt you're going to get half a dozen eggs sent from Asda by drone at any point in the next 10, 15, 20 years.
Little robot prams, won't it?
Yeah, that's it. But quick one. I know we've spent a lot of time on this question. Why did it come into existence? I'll tell you what the registration scheme does, and that's including operator ID and the competency requirement, is it gives the police something that's very easy to prosecute somebody for. They either are complying and they're registered and displayed an operator ID and have got a flyer ID or a recognised competency, or they don't. And if they don't, it's an easy prosecution. Where quite often previously, it was quite difficult to prosecute somebody for breaching the air navigation order with unmanned aircraft. So that's perhaps part of it. Right, next question. We've got still quite a few to go. Adrian Addison, in my club, we both fly both IC and electric fixed wing models. Would I have to do 2 tests, one IC and one silent flight, to qualify as a club examiner for all the models in our club?
We're all shaking our heads already.
Nope. Yes, everyone's doing this. No.
Whatever test you take an aircraft with, the examiner will normally ask questions that are kind of generic. So if someone comes to me with an IC or electric model for a test, I might ask them what might they consider if they were flying IC. If they got an IC model, I might ask them what propeller they wouldn't use on an IC model. And I'm looking for questions about not using electric props and stuff like that. So there's a lot of crossover already in the tests.
Yeah.
So,
But I think the important point is it's a powered model. It doesn't matter what the motive power is.
Test, exactly.
Yeah. I think because he's used the term silent flight in there, we perhaps just need to clear up the difference. I'm assuming he's asking the question IC and electric, and can your examiner test for both for the fixed wing power test? We do have some specific silent flight tests, which are effectively glider tests, but it could be electric power, thermal, or slope soaring gliders, which is a different discipline, to the fixed wing power test. Same as
helicopter is, yeah.
Yeah, but once if you're an examiner in one discipline, I think they would say once you've had the B in the other discipline for a certain length of time, if your club puts you forward to be an examiner in it, it's pretty much almost a rubber stamping exercise, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Any club examiner can assess any A certificate, and once they've passed their B certificate in an additional discipline, after 6 months, the club can also put them forward to be an examiner in that discipline as well.
Ian McKenzie, quick one. This one, is there an expiry date for the certificate?
Def.
The RCC.
Where it just says the certificate. So for the RCC online test, yes, it's 5 years. For all the others, no, they last forever.
For life.
Oh, unless you pass away.
Well, the certificate still exists technically. Steve Bishop asks, how do you quality check the standard of club examiners to ensure consistency between different clubs and areas?
That's down to the area chief examiners and the area coordinators. So if it's Steve Bishop from the Northwest, for example, Kevin Watson's our area coordinator, I'm one of the area chief examiners. So if we were getting a new club examiner, it would be one of myself or one of the other aces that are sent out to test them. So we're all looking and sort of singing from the same song sheet, as it were, to make sure they're all performing at the same sort of level. Once we've passed them, it's then down to the clubs to maintain and keep track of them. So it's like we were saying earlier on, if the person is current, staying active, flying regularly, working as an examiner regularly, it shouldn't be an issue. If they haven't flown for 5 or 6 years and they just turn up at this club on a Sunday and drink tea and eat biscuits and never fly anything, it might be time for the club to actually retire them as an examiner. And I think they get a certificate now as well, don't they, when we retire?
They can do, as an option for a
so that's retired naturally. That's not a euphemism for getting a hitman to get rid of them. That's
But no,
I think it's important. There's a fairly well-defined assessment process as well for examiners. So any potential new examiners have to go through this assessment, and examiners from the past who perhaps stood down for the role for a number of years. If you miss a year and you're not ratified for whatever reason, when you come back, you would have to be reassessed through this same process. So,
from scratch, basically.
It's I don't think we're asking too much there for all examiners to pass the assessment. Essentially, you need to fly the B test effectively as a candidate, and it doesn't have to be perfect because nobody flies it perfectly all the time. But the important thing is you need to be able to assess where it could have been better or where you got things wrong, and critique your own flying. And then the second part of the test, you will be taking somebody else for either an A or preferably a B test to see how you act as an examiner. And then there's a bit of a discussion. So it's thorough, but it's not thumbscrew level of thorough, shall we say. Quick comment from Wayne Broom. Chesil are holding their testing day on June the 3rd.
Cool.
Good.
Calendar, please.
Yep. Can we confirm there are no longer any mandatory questions as such posed during the A test or B test for that matter, if proof of completing the RCC test is provided?
No,
that's correct. I'm updating. It's one of the things.
Well, the answer is yes. We can confirm that is the case. Yeah.
Well, no. The important point here is that an examiner could still, even though you've presented with the RCCs, so you're not required to answer the mandatory questions, an examiner could still ask you a regulatory based question
as one of their minimum 5 regular
or 8.
questions.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's an important point to make.
And as part of the supplementary questions, they could ask questions that relate to your understanding of what some of the mandatory questions were as well. So Chris Anderson, could chief examiners be able to access data such as to RCC certificate prior to a test being carried out and see that B cert has been held for the necessary period? No, is the short answer.
GDPR and data protection.
Yeah. But ultimately, when any club puts somebody forward through the online form to be assessed as an examiner, it's checked before it gets passed on to the area coordinator anyway.
Yep.
So that, it won't get passed on to them, or they'll be made aware of it and point out that they haven't held the B test for long enough anyway. So it's not something that's actually required.
There is an easy fix to that. If you get to your test and they can't provide them proof, we had it at one of the achievement scheme events. We just got them to go and sit in the corner for 5 minutes on an iPad and do it.
For the RCC, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
every candidate should be able to prove it. And of course, now we've got the digital wallet, the membership card on there. It shows on there as well. So
The candidates can always log into the Just Go portal on their phone as well and show you what they've got in their accounts if they're happy to share their information that way themselves.
yeah. Right, there's a long one there from Rob talking about full power checks on full size. Says it doesn't replicate full, or it's not quite correct. It says further to a question from Russ Bowie regarding full and free full power checks. This was a comment that doing them together replicates full size, but this isn't quite correct. The full power check is conducted separately to the full and free.
That's correct.
In the case of tail drag aircraft, you wouldn't want the engine at full power whilst pushing the stick full forward.
No.
Full and free checks are vital to confirm you can achieve full deflection without binding, whilst engine run-up checks are self-explanatory.
I wouldn't argue with that. Yep.
Yeah. I think this is more of a comment from Eugene Anker. I feel that the consistency between examiner comes from the area chief examiners, and as Duncan says, the club also monitors the examiners, or that is how they do it in Harlow.
Yeah,
good. That's how it should be done. Right, Sue Johnson's asking, is there ever a chance to do this on any other days than Tuesday and Wednesday at Buckminster? I volunteer during the week.
We've got the Easter weekend and then one in August this year. We've got two, haven't we?
Indeed, yeah. There's always been at least one achievement scheme hosted event at weekends at Buckminster, and there's two this year. It's
some of the other clubs, like Charlie's club last year, you did one at a weekend, I believe, as well, didn't you?
Yeah.
What we tend to find is that clubs specifically do weekends because they do weekends. It's the best way to do it. People who can't do a midweek slot can do a weekend slot as a club.
Yeah, that's exactly it, isn't it? And the it's quite busy as Buckminster at weekends, so to get to Buckminster is pretty good. But I can bring up now the dates of the Buckminster events this year, so I'm quickly going to share my screen. So this is on the Achievement Scheme website, and hopefully you can see those there.
Yeah.
So 9th to the 12th of April, so that's the Easter weekend, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. This year, and also the 4th to the 6th of August is the summer flying, and there's a whole host of dates there for the midweek ones as well, which have done well this year, weather permitting, of course. Adrian Haywood, is there a case for a standardised training course for new pilots? This will give them the training in the basic manoeuvres, building up to takeoff, landing, and the air test.
It's called a flying start.
Yeah.
Like I say, we have a flight training manual. Yeah. Hang on a second.
We have the flying start for both fixed wing, and there's also the new one that was launched last year for helicopters.
Yeah, on the Achievement Scheme website to download.
There we go.
Yeah, so that gives if you're set the approved instructor test, it would generally be based about what's in the flying start and following the lessons in there. But I do think it's worth pointing out that different people learn in different ways as well. So what works for one may not work for another.
Yeah.
Peter Wilson asking, Sweets, when will we see the amended acronyms? Actually, when the documents, when they go up in the next couple of days, I've got the amended ones in, and the handbook's not far off. I think there was a few bits and pieces that the chief exec was still having to gather in.
I was going to say we have pinged him all the revised wording, haven't we? But it's just not appeared yet.
Yeah. Chris said, why has my A certificate disappeared from my qualifications in member profile? Don't know, but if you ping me an email, we'll have a look at it for you. Wayne Broom's not really achievement scheme question. Do you think we'll end up with a transponder? I would think, and I'm going to be really brief, I'm not going to go into much of an explanation because it's not for tonight. I think it's unlikely at club fields. I think there'll be other methods, but that's just my feeling at the moment. Right, John Leach. That's John. You need to drop me an email on that. It's not really an achievement scheme question. There isn't a problem. They are going through, but it may well be that there's been an issue with yours. But drop me an email, andy@bmfa.org, and we can get that sorted for you. Maurice Dyer, where are the mandatory questions listed, please?
On the Achievement Scheme website under the Mandatory Questions tab.
Every guidance document, Achievement Scheme handbook.
Yep.
Yeah, on the website.
Yeah. Martin Harris says, sadly, I heard a story from a reliable source that 2 recent examiner candidates were failed due to not flying perfect tests. The CE stated with some apparent pride that he had never passed an examiner candidate on the first attempt.
That's news to us.
Well, yeah, I mean, ultimately, we hear these anecdotal stories every now and then, but nobody ever, you know, if somebody's got a major issue, they need to write into Duncan, not me. Right into Duncan.
No. Yeah. No, okay, it is.
Yeah.
You're right, Andy. Joking aside, that does fall across my desk. So
yeah, and then it can be looked at. But as you say, we will get the odd individual that shall we say they're outliers.
I was going to say they're very rare, but there have been occasions where we've had to organise an independent test, or I've had to organise an independent test, usually in conjunction with the ASRC. But you could count those events on the fingers of one hand over my 10-year term in this role. So as Andy said, they're rare events. So.
Mm-hmm. And that is all. 31 questions answered there. That's good going. So, and that's all of them. So I think we can perhaps call it a night. So at this point, I'm going to stop the